multiple incubatees in last couple of days. And we realized that a lot of things need to be given to them. In fact, the whole idea was to do a face-to-face program in the month of June, but we felt that this was the right time to utilize and reach out to them. And that's where we started the series of sessions, where we started off with the first one on value proposition and ideation value proposition, and then we moved on to the other areas slowly and gradually. We had Kaustubh Muzumdar, who spoke on how do you get the customers in the difficult times. Then we had one more session which was done by Prajakta. Prajakta spoke on the business planning, and it is covering the basic aspects of business plan, and then also how do we plan ourselves in next couple of months. And then yesterday we had Bikram Mahajan. He spoke on funding and sources of funding in the difficult times. Though someone made a mention to me that why am I using the word difficult times again and again. However, it is important for us to understand what lies ahead of us in future. Not many people are able to predict. Yesterday there was a huge big of big news in the market yesterday with Facebook coming in with Geo, and then it's looking up to startups is what I understand. I'm sure you could cover some aspects of it. Audience, today we have with us Vivek Sadare. Vivek is the founder for Legal Logic. He's an expert in legal issues, and he's a company secretary and a law graduate, and he has been dealing with a lot of startups in the city of Pune, and also working with startups outside Pune. I don't think there is any deal that happens in Pune where Vivek is not a part of it, and Legal Logic is not a part of it. He is one of the rocking young gentlemen that I've come across who spent a little of his lifetime in a big conglomerate Persistent, and now he's on his own and running his own enterprise. He's going to be speaking to us on legal issues and challenges post-COVID. Over to you, Vivek.
Thank you so much, madam. And, this is a great initiative. I have always admired your ability to bring various people together, and it's not easy at all, especially in these trying times. So thank you so much for what you are doing for the ecosystem and your team as well, madam. So appreciate it very much. And of course, thank you for inviting me here. I have some things that I intend to talk, but feel free to put in your questions on the chat or some other means. If you want to write to madam, she can air it to me as we speak. My idea is not to lecture, because this is not the time to lecture, but this is the time to collaborate and come together to find a solution to something that no one has an answer to. The legal fraternity doesn't have an answer to, the political fraternity doesn't have an answer to, no one has an answer to the enormous, unprecedented situation that has come about. But equally so, there are opportunities, as madam rightly said. We saw a deal as large as 43,000 crore rupees between Reliance and Facebook. And while it's good to say that, Reliance is a large organization, so is Facebook, which is true, but they all have risen from where everyone starts from. And that gives me confidence and and hope and belief. When we started about 7 years back, the belief was we started like this as well, where we had nothing to look forward to specifically, and we just took the plunge, thinking that there is a large amount of interest in what we are doing and what we provide to. And here we are 7 years down the line. Even then, in this downtime, me and my team are busy more than 12 hours. It's very, very tiring at this time. but it's very interesting as well. So, I firmly believe that life will come back with more vengeance, with more ability for all of us to track something which is more meaningful than what it was even 6 weeks back. I'm going to talk about how and what is it that we are looking at during COVID, post COVID, from the legal standpoint, and what could we do to utilize this time to put our house in order. So, what we have been recommending is there are 2 or 3 types of issues everyone is grappling with. The issue of what do I do today, the issue of unknown as to what will the future unfold, and the third important thing is that what I have done in the past, and if there is anything that I need to do a course correction on. And all of these are good questions for all professionals like me to ask and answer. And I'm going to keep my focus in terms of what a young company or a matured company or a growing company should be looking at doing in these times. Obviously from a legal standpoint, and I want to restrict myself to this topic at this time. Now, let's think about what's happening right now. And many of us are in a lockdown situation. Rather, most of us are in a lockdown situation, and most of things seem to be, come to a grinding halt. There's nothing happening. But it is not like that. I think once you start to look at what's happening within your ecosystem, not just in your company, but within your ecosystem, you will find that there is enough that you could think about as to what is it that you could drive confidence from, as well as what you could drive, inspiration from. Let me give you an example. In Pune, there is this company called My Labs, which came into limelight because of the test kits that they put in, in a 6 weeks time, and the lady who did that, delivered a baby soon after releasing the kit, and she is on, Who's Who page at this time. Serum invested into it, Mr. Abhijit Pawar invested into it, and so on and so forth. Pune has been at the forefront of the activity in COVID, including the NIV that we have, as well as the venture center, which is leading the effort at this point in time and as we speak. Now think about it in terms of what your business is, and is there any way to collaborate with any of these particular companies that might be trying to do something which is in their domain, but is there something that you could do with them? Okay, that's an important question for all of us to understand and keep looking at. There are, if you look at, food companies, which are, cloud kitchen companies, who are, working around the clock to make sure that the food is delivered and food is prepared and food is available. Can we make, a dent in that business is another thought that you could potentially look at. Or the content-based companies who are, keeping each one of us busy, me, you, everyone. Is there a play for any one of us is something that we could obviously look at without deviating too much from what you are actually looking at. Okay, I'm not trying to suggest that pivot into something which is drastically different than what you are. You may want to do it, but that's not what I'm trying to say. All that I'm trying to say is that there is enough opportunity if you were to open the box and start to look outside your slated box in which you are at this point in time. Now, when we look at from the legal standpoint, we are recommending the following to people, that there are some things that you had kept pending. For example, some of you might have a situation where you are co-founders, where there are 2 or 3 people coming together and forming a company. It is very, very important and critical that you have what you call as a co-founder agreement put in place. This is the time to do it, because you don't get time when you are busy with your customer deliveries, with your R&D, with your IP creation and whatnot. But these are some things which are very important, very hygiene to me in terms of running a business, and while you are looking at investments and whatnot going forward, that you close on some hygiene factors, and one of them is a co-founder agreement. What I'm talking about a situation where two founders come together. They have rules of the game set between themselves. Remember, you might be friends, you might be very close to each other, you may know each other for a long period of time, but remember that this is business, and a third person who looks at your business does not know you as well as you both, or three of you or four of you, know each other. When you look at that aspect, you must make sure that you are effectively getting into agreement, inter se between people who are co-founders in the company, for something, what you call as a worst case scenario, something goes wrong. We are all mortal human beings. It's not just anything can happen to anyone. What is it that the business will do if you are not around? If you decide to move on, how will you move on, and how does the business continues? Remember that what you are doing is for profit business, and what you are doing is to create an entity which will last beyond you, and therefore you create entities like an limited liability partnership or a private limited company. One of the reasons for creating an incorporated entity is to have that entity live beyond yourself, and that's what we call as a going concern. A company is a going concern, and we therefore recommend that you don't do something which is a proprietary or partnership, which would die effectively along with the founder, or the proprietor or the co-founder, if it is not an incorporated entity. And that's one of the reasons that you would want to first evaluate, if you are contemplating business, or if you are contemplating as to what entity to look at from your perspective, this is the time to do that as well. And in terms of evaluating whether LLP is a better off idea, or a private limited company is a better off idea. And while you do so, if you are, as I said, co-founding team, creating this important document of co-founder agreement. And I've been very, very vocal in various forums that in India, what we find is, the friendship leads to a business. And unfortunately, because business is not assured, something happens, and the resultant is obviously the business doesn't survive, which is fine. But what is not good is the relationship not surviving. Remember that all that you do today, if you reflect back in last, I think it's 4 weeks now or more than that, that we are all in a lockdown situation. When you sleep, when you have time to reflect, it is people, it is relationship that you reflect on. And there's nothing more that you will do at this point in time and going forward as well. And therefore, these documents, these co-founder agreements, or certain of these things are documents that create trust between people and create and sustain relationship as you go forward. So for example, if one of the co-founders decides to move on, at that point in time, you're not getting into a relationship issue. You're not getting into a situation where the relationship will come to a halt, but the document that you have agreed to, will be tested. And based on the document, you will run through what is the exit and how exactly the exit will go on. Remember, most of the time, what we see businesses fail is not just on account of business not doing well, but people in the business who have started, ज्यांनी जन्म दिलाय त्या business ला, those people not agreeing to the terms of the game or the contours of the game that they had set up. And therefore, while the business may not sustain, for you to sustain the relationship lifelong, it is important that you create, a co-founder agreement as you look at, running a business. The second point, as I mentioned, is the fact that you would want to have an entity set up, which is either a private limited company or an LLP. We don't recommend unincorporated entity because of the liability situation, because of the continuity situation. And that second important element for you to think about as to what entity are you, looking at? And each one has its pros and cons. The easiest way to look at is if your business is going to need money, external money, third party money, which is not from the co-founder or the friends and family, then you are effectively looking at a private limited company by default, without getting into too much of debate and too much of overall situation. My clear sense is, if you are looking at a third party investment going forward, right? I mean, it may not be immediate, but in eventuality, your business needs capital. That is for sure in your mind from a third party. You must do a private limited company. LLP is not where the investor come and invest, because of the inherent nature of protection that the investors have under the Companies Act as a shareholder, as against an LLP where there is a profit share with the partners, and the concept of designated partner. So therefore, if your business needs external capital, my answer is very clear, that you must go and do a private limited company, as against your business not needing capital. For example, for a company like ours, for a business like ours, for a practice like ours, where we and I'm saying touch wood, we don't need external capital, because it's a consulting business, it's an advisory business, it's a legal firm essentially. We created an LLP for various reasons, and so on. So would you find big fours, all the big fours have an LLP as a setup, apart from they being auditor as a partnership firm driven by statute and what have you. So effectively, if your business is not mandated statutorily, or if you don't need money, LLP becomes a default. But if you need an external money, then a private limited company becomes a default. That's my, more or less. And then you can go deep into, obviously, if you are in a manufacturing sector today, the government has provided a 15% income tax slab for all new companies that come up to 2023. And that's like a huge benefit. 15% income tax is one of the lowest in the world at this point in time. But remember, that is only for the manufacturing companies. All other entities are at 22% income tax slab. With surcharge, it goes to about 25% and change. So you are looking at essentially 15% for newly incorporated manufacturing companies, and 25% effective tax rate for all other private limited companies. LLP has a full-fledged tax, though there is a dividend tax that goes in the hands of shareholder now, with an amendment that came in the budget, the last budget that got presented in February. So effectively, in the hands of shareholder, there is a tax on the dividend. Therefore, when you draw a comparison between an LLP versus a private limited company, tax, while it's a consideration to look at, but it gets neutralized to a large extent as you are looking at a dividend tax in the hands of shareholder when you are creating a private limited company, as against the LLP, which has a full-fledged tax of 30+% and the surcharge associated with it. So that's the landscape in which we are looking at on the incorporation side. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you possibly have during this time, or maybe later. I'll give you my email address at the end of the session. So that's the second point I wanted to talk about. And the third important point is, as you are setting up your business, it is imperative that you are online visible, right? So you have a website, you have a brand, you have a name for yourself, right? A name Vivek or Atul or Dilip or Manjusha, all are very common names, and therefore what distinguishes is our own facial features, the way we speak and whatnot. For the company and the business, it's an invisible thing and it's an artificial person, and therefore naming someone which is distinct then what is existing business is an important one. So for example, you can't have an Infosys created again, right, unless you are Infosys driven business, or a Reliance created again, because Reliance is a brand in itself, and so is Mahindra, and so is Kirloskar, and what have you. So what are we talking about? We are talking therefore about a distinct legal entity with distinct name and identity for that legal entity. And therefore, when you think about a name, you must do three things together. One, make sure that that name is available for incorporation purpose. Second, there is a domain name available if you're going to use the same thing. So for example, we now have legallogic.co.in as our domain name. If that was not available, possibly, for us to say that we are Legal Logic is like saying that I have one name, but someone is, sitting on the web with that name, and that confuses in the minds of people. So the second important thing as you look at while creating your name is to have a domain name protected. And the third important thing is simultaneously, these are not something that you do as a step function, but all of this has to be done simultaneously. And the third thing that I would advise is to have a trademark registered along with this, which means that you are doing a trademark protection, you're doing domain name protection, and therefore you are going to ROC, Registrar of Companies, and effectively putting a name to yourself, and getting that name protected as well. So that's an important element in terms of not missing out on these important situations, because it can't be a situation where you don't have a trademark, and therefore the person who's the owner of trademark comes and says that, guys, you know what, the name that you are using is already protected by me, and you now go and change it. These are all very expensive propositions. Once you already have branded yourself, to debrand and come back in the business with a different brand, it's a costly affair. There's a goodwill associated with what you do. You're creating a goodwill essentially for your business, and then you don't want to be in a mess going into running a business. And therefore, these three things of trademarking, doing a domain name, and doing a name with the ROC as you create and incorporate business, being done simultaneously, will help out to a large extent. So that's just quick input in terms of how you set up and create what you create. The other aspect, very, very important, and let's talk something, a little deeper into it, is about your shareholding pattern. One of the things that we have been seeing of late is that people have not given a deep thought in terms of what is their shareholding pattern. What do I mean by shareholding pattern is in terms of what do the founders hold, what do the co-founders hold in the company, what do senior people in the company hold as shares, if at all, and then if you have a friends and family and investor round and whatnot. Remember that one of the most critical thing in your business, for what you are doing business, it's a for-profit business, is the value that you are creating in the business, right? So when you are creating value in your business, you must make sure that the value being created is reflected in the shares that you have in the company. So what did Reliance do today when they got in this large investment? All that they have done is sold 9.9% of the company and got $5.7 billion against it, right? So the question here is that, what did they do? They did nothing, or none of us do anything but effectively trade in shares. Therefore, building your shareholding pattern is as critical as building anything else. We have had several cases where people without, and remember that there is a pressure, I understand, to raise capital. There is a pressure in terms of building, business and doing 10 things simultaneously. And that's where the help comes into play. For example, like what Prajakta must have told you the other day on the business plan, the business plan would provide you with a gap on your cash flow, right? I mean, 2 years down the line, your business needs, because of the business plan, maybe $2 million, and that's what you're trying to raise today. When you raise that $2 million, at what value you raise and on what terms that you raise that money becomes extremely critical. Like I was saying, that we have had several situations where the businesses raised capital much in advance, diluted far more than what they otherwise would have. They did not need that money all at one go, but the dilution happened immediately after they raised that money, and their shareholding pattern was such that the founders effectively had a situation of not holding more than 30% of the company by the time they completed their friends and family round. Okay. And now at 30%, no material investor, okay, which is an institutional investor, is willing to come and make an investment, because you will further dilute, as that investor would want at least 15 to 20% of the company. And if you people go below a 25% threshold, then that's a big red flag for the investors as well. I'm talking about meaningful investors, not greedy investors. The meaningful investors want you to have more skin in the game than what they have. What it means is, if there is a business which goes upside down, at that time you lose more than the investors, because it is your business and it is you who's driving that particular thing. And therefore, what is important to understand and appreciate is that your shareholding after Series A in the company, collectively as founders, should not go below 60%. I repeat that, and this is ideal world, this is not gospel truth, but this is important, that you should remember as a threshold that you should be at least at 60% collectively as founders in the company after the Series A round is completed. Okay. What it means is you must plan your business in a manner where your dilution is not more than 40% after the Series A round is accomplished. Remember that, the businesses do better after the Series A round. And of course, Series B is tougher than Series A, because, now you're set up for certain milestones. You're set up for something which is more meaningful, more robust in nature. But I have seen that, if you have managed your shareholding pattern well, your ability to raise Series B is far more as compared to you not being able to do it when you are, already diluted significantly more than this threshold while you are a Series A company, while you are taken a Series A funding essentially. So that's just very, very important element in terms of your planning. While you do the business plan, make sure that the business plan is tied up with your shareholding pattern. If you miss out on this, then the hard work that you are putting in, even though that may continue and there is a business to be made and there is enough that you could do, but people will be wary of putting in money in your company, because you yourself are not in control of the business from economic standpoint, and therefore that shareholding pattern is very important. And here I would strongly urge you to take professional help in terms of dealing with these situations, because these are not situations where someone who is a quack, you go to a doctor when some of these situations happen, right? What we are dealing with, if you go to a quack or you go to a wrong person, you will face lifelong consequences. And same is the situation where you are dealing with your share cap table and related aspect. If you are not seeking help at the right time from the right professional, you might end up in a situation which is difficult to undo. One of the things that I have learned over time is that when you issue shares, okay, in India, it is very, very difficult to get back the control of those shares. Okay, it is virtually impossible. So the only way for you to get back the control of the company is for you to put in money or to buy back those shares. And to buy back, you need money. To put in additional capital, you need money. So you are looking at self-funding the entity after you have diluted, in one way or the other. And therefore, before you do any dilution, before you touch your shareholding pattern, before you get into any kind of fundraise, please take professional help. That would, I'm completely aware of the fact that, the funds are short. You have to grapple with whether you put in those funds to X or Y. But remember that there is cost that you pay either today or tomorrow for not seeking advice, which is required at an appropriate time. Okay, it is very, very important. And also remember that there is help available. We in the city of Pune, assuming that most of you are from Pune, or maybe if you are outside of Pune as well, there is enough help available. There is enough, there are enough people who would be willing to step in and provide that particular counsel for money, without money. It is about you to seek that particular help. And I urge everyone to make sure that without being, and there is no shame in terms of asking for help, and there's no shame in asking for a professional help, because that's what is required when it is required. Even for our business, for example, we don't do our compliances ourselves. We ask professional help because we like to concentrate more on our customer engagement, and we leave our compliances to someone who can do more justice to it, and who's more dispassionate about those compliances essentially. And therefore, seeking a professional help is another important takeaway from what I'm talking to you. Okay, at appropriate time. You don't need help for every small little damn thing, but you need help when there are critical situations which are impossible to undo once they are done. I call them a permanent marker situations on your in your business. So if anything that you believe is a permanent marker which is difficult to erase, which will take long time to erase, or it will, मैं आपण त्या कागदावर काही केलं किंवा कापडावर काही लिहिलं, unless you put a bleach, unless you put an acid, and it hurts when you put an acid, it is difficult to erase. And these are those decisions which therefore you must make sure that you are very, very cognizant of. That's something that I wanted to talk about. The other aspect is many of you, while I have interacted with some of the companies in the past, I believe are creating intellectual property, and which is a great thing, and which is what will serve the best as we go forward. So those who are creating intellectual property must also make sure that you have processes, practices, and documentation. All of these three things together, I'll repeat: processes, practices, and documentation. All these three things simultaneously to make sure that your IP is protected to earn you big bucks end of the day. Okay, that is the only thing that is going to drive the whole aspect of it. Why did Jio get this high amount of money? The only reason is that they have created obviously an ecosystem, which is a large one, but also importantly, they have their own intellectual property. Their own intellectual property is playing out, and they have invested for a long period of time to get something out of it. And you will find that so is all other product companies that you see flourishing at this point in time. So what am I talking about? Not just theoretical, but what am I talking about is that are your systems vulnerable where someone could just pick up your IP, that is a source code, simplistically put, and copy it and move on? Okay. Are your system vulnerable where people can peep into your bedrooms, and when I say bedrooms, it's your source code again, or your something which is copyrightable, licensable situation, and just picks up that, takes a snapshot, create something out of it? So are you vulnerable from your system perspective and process perspective? one of the things that we note is the USB ports, very simplistically put again. Everyone today works on laptops, and you have USB ports. You effectively, while you are searching for a laptop, you ask for, do you have 3 ports, USB ports, you have 4 USB ports and whatnot, and they become your trap. When those are open, and people can simply put a USB stick and pull out all the data from the machine, and you become so vulnerable for your intellectual property. So remember that that is a practical way and the process that you would put in terms of making sure that you are not susceptible for attacks. Obviously, there are now a lot of tools which are available online which could help you, create that. Learn about the data security, privacy, and whatnot, and then creating what you call as an invention, assignment, and confidentiality document that you get signed from all your employees and all your consultants, so that the IP remains with the company all the time. Remember that even the co-founders must assign the IP to the company without any much debate on this topic at all, which means that anything that is being done in the interest of the company, and the output and the result of what is being done by all people who are working for the company are essentially, effectively helping the company increase its value, because that's what the whole attempt is. And therefore, creating this document where all the intellectual property is assigned back to the company is very important. Remember, one of the reasons why you see the companies in the Silicon Valley become big is because whatever I'm talking to you is an hygiene in the US. Okay, people don't start their business unless they have put a tick mark in on all of these aspects, okay, before they get into the market, because it's highly litigious situation there, the stakes are high, and so on and so forth. But I think it's very important for us to learn the good practices that have evolved over a period of time, and they are not difficult to implement at all, but important and a must for sure for all of us to do, so that something which is what we call as low hanging fruit doesn't hurt you in the long run, okay, after having done so much of hard work that all of you put in. So that's another important aspect that I would want you to look at in terms of protecting your intellectual property. And then before I stop and I'll start to take more questions, I wanted to talk to you about the importance of creating proper documentation. And again, I have heard this enough from people that, we are a startup. There is a larger customer who's, willing to sign up, but he's not willing to sign up on the customer contract. Or for that matter, vendors that you select, you've not done a proper contract. All of these, okay, remember, while we are dealing with this COVID-19, are coming to the fore because you are looking at a situation where many of the people did not enter into a contract, and today are in a situation and grappling the situation where if they were being asked to comply with certain things, or they are being they want someone else to comply with something, it's becoming very, very difficult because there is no written contract and it is all on trust. I understand that life runs on trust, and there's no second thought to it, okay, there's no second thought to it, that life will continue to run on trust, and that's the best way of dealing with it. But it is not about the trust only when you're drawing a contract, okay. What do you draw a contract for? You draw a contract for various reasons, and the most important thing, again, as I said on the co-founder agreement, in this contract as well, what you do is to keep the relationship intact, end of the day. For example, if there is a termination clause written in the manner in which it is written, it's easy for both parties to understand and appreciate that this is what we had agreed to in the contract, and we will run with it and we will respect that. More often than not, you will find that both parties will respect that particular contract and will not come, question what was agreed to. And this is, what I call not as a general rule, but there will be exceptions, but those exceptions are far and few. You will find more people will honor the contract. But for that reason, it is important that your documentation, uh, either on the customer side or on the vendor side or on the employee side or any other thing that you could think about, is documented well. It is not important that it is a classical legal agreement, but it is important that it is documented. It could be in a plain English language, no problem. It could be, based on your understanding about the issues. Remember that the commercial transaction is reflection of what you and your customer, or you and your vendors, and you or your employees think about. There's nothing more to it. You could always add something which is, which is important for us to consider, but it's important that you document it. uh, uh, when you have something which is documented, you will find that when someone comes as an investor, when someone comes as, someone who is looking at investing into the company, they feel more comfortable. They feel more comfortable with the fact that they're dealing with someone who is more professional, and who is more adept at the practices, and they will provide you with a right valuation as well, when they see a good company as such. I'll stop here. I see a couple of questions. I'll answer them, but let me just hand it over to Madam for a minute if she has anything specific to ask or for me to talk about, and then I'll pick up the questions. Madam, over to you.
Thank you, Vivek, for such an insightful session. I think it was more from the perspective of the new startups as to what they really need to do. This is really an eye opener for them, and I hope that they take some of the pointers that you have given and probably implement that. So I'm sure they would have really understood the concepts that you were trying to speak of. I had one small area that I wanted you to kind of speak on. Do you see any possibility of, the mergers of two or three startups or coming together of two or three companies together to bring out a solution, especially in the post-COVID times where someone has one technology, someone has one expertise, but there's a huge manufacturer somewhere else. They don't have the manufacturing facility. So where probably the transfers could happen because innovative brains are working together. So
Yeah,
this
very
is
nice.
yeah.
I
So
think
if
that's just a super point that you make, madam. And incidentally, yesterday only, there is a client of ours who is in the healthcare space, and he broached this particular conversation. He said that, look, we have a sales team, and he is a salesperson by profession, and he was asking me for some references on the healthcare companies that we work with, and he said that, this is the time for all of us to come together. And he was not too sure if it will lead to an M&A, madam. But essentially, what he was saying is that at least share the resources in a manner where, if I have an expertise built on a particular area and you have expertise, if we all join hands together for a customer, it becomes a compelling proposition. He gets, most of things as a one-stop solution. And, for example, he said that I could help sell better, someone could code better, and someone could effectively, be in a process situation. He is a better from process control standpoint. Someone could be in a manufacturing setup and stuff like that. So we just spoke about it yesterday, and that's a very, very, very good thought, madam, that you bring in. And I believe that some of those discussions in a formal setup, for example, what we are starting to see is that a common investor, say for example, he's invested into fintech domain, but the fintech is effectively providing solution to different strata of society. We believe that some of those situations will come together and they will unfold, and bringing in strengths of each other. with a common intent as well as a common shareholder is going to be the order of the day, and you will see a lot of those situations pan out as we go to post COVID era. I generally also believe that there'll be fair bit of an M&A regardless because of the need of the hour. Some people may not be able to survive the brutality of this COVID-19. Some people might say that raising funds may not be a right idea, and combining businesses is something that they would want to look at. So all of those situations will play out. We are up for very interesting times after the painful time is gone in hopefully a couple of months time.
How have been the deals in the last 1.5 months in Pune?
So the deal flow has obviously slowed down, and people would take a deep breath before putting in new money. The deals which were in the pipeline have slowed. The new deals will be slow for a while, but the conversations in terms of trying to find out what is it that a business is going to look at and what is it that you are looking at is already starting to happen. More importantly, I believe that there will be share swap mergers where instead of cash being exchanged, two people coming together and saying that, look, my value is X and yours is Y. And if it is X plus Y value, what do we exchange and become together, right? So, cashless mergers and share swap mergers will be a lot more to be seen in times to come, and will keep everyone busy.
And do you think stock options will be something that people will explore for the employees as far as the startups are concerned?
Oh yes, I mean the ESOP was already in vogue for last couple of years. It will gather pace as we go forward. But see, ESOP has its own way of being looked upon by the employees. What we see is that the young people today, who have cash as a requirement, because you need cash to run a household. Just ESOP may not work as a strategy for them. A ESOP strategy works better for middle and senior management, where the requirement of cash reduces to a large extent, and they understand the value that gets created. Okay, so you have to use ESOP in a manner which is suiting your stakeholders well, and the diaspora that you are trying to address with ESOP is well understood, because you can't fill a hungry tummy with just a paper, right? I mean, that needs a rice, that needs a bread, and that needs a soup. So, if that's taken care, then rest on the ESOP is a very, very great strategy.
We have the questions there. You could read the questions.
Okay, fine. So here we go. Let me pick up the first question from Chaitanya, who says that how much maximum cost should we spend on legal aspect? Okay, there are two aspects to it. Okay, you are looking at spending on business and not on legal. I am firm believer that when you look at any cost while you're spending, it has to make sense for your business first. Only then will you spend that money. Okay. Now, whether it is on legal, whether it is on finance, whether it is on HR, whether it is on advertisement, it all has to have a business context. And therefore, there is no parameter as such that, you're spending 1% of your revenues or 2% of revenues. If today you need a legal counsel, you need it because your business needs it. If you are looking at it from that perspective, I think you will make a better judgment in terms of what is the right way of spending that money, regardless of for what cause you are spending. So that's my take on any cost, whether it is legal or otherwise, Chaitanya. Let me take the other question from Amol. He says that for service offering company like e-learning solution, which format would be better, LLP or private limited or any other? So Amol, what I mentioned to you is that, we are looking at a situation where if your firm, if your company, which is into e-learning, doesn't need external capital, and you're set up in such a manner. For example, you're providing trainings. Online trainings is something that you do. Video recorded trainings, something that you do, and you believe that you will be self-sustained without looking for an investment, and LLP works the best. But if you believe that the investment on technology and everything else will lead you to exhaust your personal resources or the money that you make from the business in itself, you would want to look at a private limited company as an investor. As I mentioned to you, would want a private limited company as a setup as against an LLP. So that's just a question that you must answer for yourself, whether it is an investor-led business. In 2 years, 3 years time, it may not be immediate, but even then I would suggest that go in for a private limited company. But if you think that for next 5 years or next 7 years you are self-sufficient and can bootstrap, then I would strongly suggest that go in for an LLP. Let me take another one. Is having a FSI approval mandatory for food products, even if it's in a very small scale? The answer is yes. The scale doesn't matter, but you are required to follow the norms. And it's all online process at this point in time, so it should not take much efforts beyond reasonable. But you must take all the sufficient approvals, because remember that anything that you make which is food can be a potential health hazard, and therefore the checks and balances, and you come under what you call as a consumer protection law as well, where a consumer who finds something wrong with a particular product can pull you to the consumer situation. So weights and measures, which was earlier called as weights and measure, is now all clubbed into a metallurgy law, and all of that is something that you must follow to make sure that you are all protecting the consumer who's consuming any of the food product. It's about the risk associated with it, and therefore you would not want to take it. You effectively, when you take a FSI approval, you are saying that look, I disclosed everything and then I got the approval. So you get outside the liability situation most of the times. The other question from the department itself is that, is Nidhi company a way to enter finance business? The finance business could be a Nidhi company is not something that I would recommend. It is an NBFC that is more what you call considered mainstream. Nidhi companies are they are prevalent, but not as much in a formal scheme of things. So my suggestion to you would be, if you're exploring finance business, you could ride on an NBFC's license and partner with someone who already has a license, okay, if he's willing to partner with. And I'm going back to what Madam alluded to in terms of 2 or 3 companies coming together and multiplying and creating a multiplier effect. Exactly in the fintech industry, there are a lot of partnerships which were already happening with what you saw on ILNFS fiasco in 2018, and post that you had a situation where a lot of people piggybacked on one NBFC's license and continued to do business essentially. So to answer your question, it should be an NBFC piggybacked business rather than Nidhi company as such. There's another one, which things should we look into if we have a startup of organic fertilizer, which document we need to focus on? Sakshi, I'm happy to answer this offline because this may not be relevant for everyone at this point in time. So happy to take this specific question of organic fertilizer offline. There's another one. What are the licenses which we have to take before starting a venture related to food and food products? Again, the same thing. Let's connect offline and I'll answer so that everyone who's not interested in this is not, looking at it. Umesh asked the same question on FSI, which I answered right now. If going for government scheme for e-learning solutions, okay. So even if you're going for a government scheme, Amol, I think it is the same answer in terms of a private versus LLP. In government, private limited company has better weight as compared to an LLP, because LLP is a new concept in itself. So if you're clear that you're tapping into the government resources, you might want to consider private limited over LLP. That's my suggestion as such. Um uh, we can talk about it as well, Amol. If you have further any follow-on questions. How can we validate our startup idea? So my suggestion would be, if you're looking at validating from legal standpoint, I can help out. But if you are trying to validate it from finance standpoint, I think we have, people like Priya Agashe or, Prajakta Shete, who are experts into looking at all of these aspects. You should reach out to them. They'll be very, very helpful. I know they work with several of these companies, and I've had personal experience working with them, and they are, they could provide you with very good advice and help as such. Akshay is asking me as to please give top 3 legal tips advice for startups which are getting started with business activities. Akshay, as I mentioned to you, which entity you start with, protecting your name as such, uh, creating a founder agreement, uh, having a correct shareholding pattern. All of these things will go long way in terms of building your company in a scratch free manner. And also, not to forget, asking for professional help when you need that is also an important learning overall. It is like this, when you ask for your parents' advice, your girlfriend, boyfriend, your spouse advice. It is the same thing like taking help from professional. You would want to take help at appropriate time. So don't hesitate to ask for help. There is plenty which is available. Ranjit is asking as to what precautions we need to take before starting any startups. Is the same thing that I mentioned a minute back on the tips, etc. One thing that I must say very clearly is that you should have some capital of your. Okay, when I see these stories, and these are all Hollywood, Bollywood stories that. I had 100 rupees and I started business and I created $1 billion business. All those, remember, my friends, are good to hear stories. Life is not like this. With 100 rupees in pocket, businesses are not created. So you must have some capital of your own, so that you are at least able to complete the journey to a certain extent. There's no point in stopping in between. So say, for example, if you need 20-liter petrol to go to Mumbai, and there's a lockdown, and no petrol pumps are open, you have 10 liters of petrol. At the most, you will reach Lonavala or Kopoli and whatnot. There's no point in reaching Khopoli because today there's a lockdown and you will get stuck there for I don't know how long. So if you don't have clear petrol to at least go and reach your destination without any other help, there's no point in doing it. I can wait out, I can take more time, get my 20-liter filled in, and then start my venture. Okay, that's something that is very important to understand, because doing half journey helps no one. And remember that you're not doing it just to show to the society that you are an entrepreneur. You're doing it to make money. It is as simple as that. So you will make money only if you complete your journey and get to the destination, and not before that. So remember that your ability to have some cash in pocket of your own is very, very critical as you start any business.
I think
it's 12 noon, so I just will I'll give it back to you, madam.
No, you can take the other questions offline, and Vivek will always be available for our people. I can connect you to Vivek, and I can give his mail ID. I can share his mail ID, and you can reach out to him for all the legal advice. And let me tell you that thank you so much, Vivek, for such an insightful and enthusiastic talk that you gave today. I think it was really vibrant, and people have, I think the questions are just not coming to an end, but that we have a slot of 1 hour. We will kind of try and finish this here. We'll be meeting again at 12 o'clock. Today we have Geeta Tulia, who's going to be speaking on financial planning in challenging times between 2 to 3. And then Priya Gashe, who's going to be speaking to us from 4 to 5 today on determining the basic cost for startups. So Vivek has already spoken about Priya, and Geeta is another person that